Wrote this song while crewing Aaron on a 100-mile foot race through the trails in the rain and mud. How about that? Miles to go. 100 miles to go. Don't ask me why I do it, I don't know. Miles by foot. 100 miles by foot. Don't ask me why I do it, I can't stay put. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Don't ask me why I do it, but I am legit.
Hey everyone, this is Aaron Saft with another episode of the MR Runningpains podcast. Today I'll be talking again with Miriam Salloum of the Runner's Mechanic Physical Therapy. She and I are going to discuss plantar fasciitis, one of the banes of a runner's existence. Miriam gives us some great ideas and treatments, as well as kind of letting us know what it is and why it can start manifesting itself. So we'll get into that in just a second. I wanted to touch base on a few things before we do so. Last episode, I talked about coaching and whether coaching could be right for you, and whether be worth having a discussion to see if perhaps I'm the right coach for you. And I want to thank you for the overwhelming response. I've had a number of people reach out to me about coaching, which it means the world to me. So thank you guys for that support, for believing in me and having the faith to reach out. It definitely means the world to me. So thank you guys. I look forward to working with the new clients. And again, if you feel you're thinking about it and just want to talk about it, reach out. I would certainly appreciate that. So this past weekend, I had a number of the athletes I do coach came over to my house for an event. We, of course, have had so many events postponed and canceled that I put on an event here at the house for my athletes that I coach. We had a 6, 12, and 24-hour race. We had a 3-mile loop here from the house. It was great. I had 2 athletes finish 100 miles, which was awesome. It was the first time they had ever done 100 miles. So kudos to them, Dennis and Nathan. Awesome job, you two. I had one gentleman finish 100K. Great job, Blake. That was double the distance he'd ever been. So kudos to you, sir. He is going to try to complete 100 miles and qualify for the Cadona 250 miler from Aravipa Running. So I wish him well in that. We're going to figure out how we can get a 100-miler in for him. We're planning some events for the fall. So if you want to join us in the coaching group, reach out. We're creating our own events since a lot of things are getting postponed and canceled. So a number of my athletes are going to do half marathon, marathon, and obviously some ultras. So we're planning for all those things. We're just making our own events and doing it so that we have things to train for and things to look forward to. So something you're interested in, reach out. And once again, congrats to all those guys. We had some 50K finishers as well. Robin and Courtney, congratulations to you guys, as well as Tom and Samantha that finished just over a marathon. And Sumanth and Abby, want to thank you guys for coming out. They got their long runs in while some of these guys were doing loops and just joined for company. It was just a fun day. We had a great time. We didn't overdo the numbers. We didn't have a lot of people. We kind of restricted how much crew and pacers and stuff we had here. Plenty of space. We rented some porta johns and we had tents set out and plenty of space, food. It was just a great time. It was like we had a race, but 8 to 10 people. So really cool. Fun experience. Got some pictures up on the MR Runningpains coaching Facebook page and my Instagram. So check those out. The Facebook page itself, the MR Runningpains coaching Facebook page, and I'm going to add podcasts to that as well. It's just going to be a resource. Some things that come across that might be helpful to you guys. So if you want to like that page and follow that page, I'm going to try to put on there articles and little tidbits that can help you in your training and your running. So if you would follow along and you can contribute as well. If you see things that come across, it's a page to share for our community, for our all of our runners. So please join me on the MR Running Page coaching Facebook page. You may come across the MR Running Page coaching Facebook page. That is a private group. That is for my athletes. Those that I'm coaching, I do have a private group for them in which we talk about all the stuff that's going on and cheer each other on. I do a Facebook Live session every Wednesday night. So yeah, if that's again, that's part of the coaching group. So join us if you're interested. That said, having just done that this past weekend, as an RD, as an official RD for events that I've put on in the past, I am retiring. I am hanging up my hat for a while, maybe to come back in the future, but for now, I'm definitely hanging up my RD hat. That would include races like Solly, DuPont. I'm not doing really anything. I had talked about Headwaters, but it's too much. Really enjoying where I'm at right now. What I'm doing, life has been a lot less stressful. I signed the papers to turn over FooterX to my my old business partner Scott. So I'm coaching now and really enjoying life with my kids. And so anyhow, it's all good. I'm hoping. I've been talking with another group that might pick up Solly, I'm speaking with the foundation this weekend. I'm resigning from the foundation, and we're speaking about Hellbender and all that. So I hope to have word about Hellbender and its future. Next episode. If we decide collectively as a group that Hellbender should go on this year, I will, of course, fulfill that obligation and make it through. I'm gonna say that the board is feeling like it's not the best idea to host it this year. But we'll make that decision this weekend and pass that information as long as as we make that decision together collectively. The other thing I've been working on is that I am training for the Art Loeb FKT. Art Lobe is a 30-mile route here. It's a point-to-point. I am starting at the Davidson River in Brevard in Pisgah Forest and running over to the Daniel Boone Boy Scout camp. I'm going to make that attempt in July as long as the forest stays open. It's going to be a supported attempt. I'm really excited about it. There's on the FKT site, my good friends Morgan Elliott, Patrick Regan, and Daniel Hamilton, they currently hold the FKT at I believe it's 5:45. So stout group there to be going against. I'm feeling like my fitness is really coming around, and I'm really feeling like I can really take a good stab at it. I haven't had this type of speed and fitness in a long time, so I'm very excited to see what happens and go after this. Had a really good workout on Sunday after being awake for forever. I didn't know how it was going to go. Hopped on the treadmill, set the incline at 7%, and worked my way down to 6:30 pace over 4 miles, and then decreased the incline and progressed down to 5:40 pace for 3 miles. So I'm really feeling good. Like I said, fitness is really awesome coming around. I haven't had turnover like this, like I said, in a long time. So really excited to see what I can do. I want to thank David Roche for his help. He's been really great at overseeing and producing this training for me. So so really appreciate everything. So we'll see how that goes. I'll announce the date as it comes closer here. I'm going to do some training runs up on Art Lobe. But you can follow along my adventures on Strava. I'm Aaron Saft, MR Runningpains on Strava. So you can follow along there, see my training. It's a good place to engage, ask questions too. And anytime you have questions about anything, don't hesitate to ask. If there's general questions that you have about training or, specifics you have about a race or anything like that, feel free to reach out. I'm here to share knowledge. I've certainly run a number of the ultras, in and around, the East Coast, as well as some others, out West and, obviously UTMB. So, anything I can do to help, I'm here for. I really appreciate your time, guys, and this conversation with Miriam. It's about a half hour, and as I said, it's specifically on plantar fasciitis. I do have 2 YouTube videos that I uploaded to my Aaron Saft channel on YouTube about plantar fasciitis, one for stretching and one for strengthening. As Miriam kind of gets into, there can be different reasons for plantar fasciitis, so each video is used for a different purpose, obviously. One for stretching out tight muscles and one for strengthening weaker muscles. So depending on what type of plantar fasciitis you have, what are the causes of it, would be the ones that you would use, obviously. I am uploading a new video as it's getting hotter here. I was teaching my athletes how to make an ice bandana out of a buff, so I'm going to upload a video here within the next day or so. So this podcast will come out Thursday, Thursday, June 11th, and I hope to have that video up, if I can get it up tomorrow, I'll do so. But look for that. It's really easy and simple. What I suggest to some of my athletes, just a little tip here, as it gets super hot and you have longer runs planned, if you can make a loop, whether it be out on the trail or from your house, and you just reload the ice bandana. If you have a car and that's your aid station, bring a cooler full of ice and just do circuits and just keep that core temperature down by using these ice bandanas. It's really going to help on the back of your neck to cool you down. Just a little quick tip there. You can refill with water and stuff too, just to keep yourself hydrated as it gets hot. And we're worrying about the heat affecting us. So anyway. Other ideas, I'm always looking up for tips and stuff. You can post that on the Facebook page, the MR Runningpains coaching Facebook page. Love to hear your tips for the heat as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Miriam, again for joining me, and I'll talk to you guys after we hear from Miriam. welcome to the MR Running Pains podcast. This is Aaron Saft. I have a returning guest in Miriam Salloum. How are you today, Miriam?
Hey, I'm great, Aaron. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. It's my honor and pleasure. We are recording here the day before this will release, and we are going to talk about plantar fasciitis, the curse word to many runners. It seems that when I was in run retail, seemed like maybe 60% of the people that came through our door would talk about plantar fasciitis or having plantar fasciitis or had it at one point. So figured this would be a good topic, and you're a great expert to help us attack this. So those of you who don't know Miriam, you want to take a quick second to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Miriam Salloum. I'm the owner and primary practitioner at the Runner's Mechanic Physical Therapy Clinic. I work with general orthopedics also, but I primarily specialize in video gait analysis and running rehabilitation. So
perfect.
That's it in a nutshell.
Miriam's been my physical therapist forever. So, I went through plantar fasciitis myself. So, this is a topic that I'm quite familiar with. Some people don't know. So let's start with the real basics. What is fascia?
Yeah, so fascia is basically just collagen that encases our muscles and in all of our viscera. And a lot of times we'll give the analogy which is sometimes a little gross, but if you ever cut chicken, you can pull away some of that kind of white sheen away from the chicken meat. That's kind of fascia. That's what it kind of looks like when you dissect it. But it basically encases our muscles and then spindles down into the tendons. But it's kind of interesting because it's a continuous sheet throughout our body. So it also helps connect our muscles in kind of a power system so they can transfer power along a chain of muscles, which sometimes you'll hear like posterior chain and those kinds of things. But it really comes into play a lot when we start talking about lower limb pathologies, hamstrings, calf, plantar fasciitis, because this fascial chain is very important in that. And we'll probably get to that a little bit later on. So. But yeah, that's all it is.
Okay. And where is the plantar?
Yeah, so I mean, technically speaking, if you're talking about the plantar fascia of the foot, plantar just means the bottom surface. So that when we talk about the plantar surface of the foot, the bottom surface of the foot. And so if you look at the heel bone, and if you saw it like an anatomy book, it almost looks horribly painful, but it's actually naturally occurring. It's called a calcaneal tuberosity, and it's like this little bony projection from the bottom of the heel bone, and that's actually where the plantar fascia starts. Is kind of on that little protuberance on the heel bone, and it actually splays all the way down the foot into the toe, into the great toe. So if we're just talking about that section, that's the plantar fascia of the foot. But it actually is a continuation of the calf fascia, the Achilles, and some of the fat pad. So it's a little bit more global if you look at all of its connections. But locally, that's where it goes from, is from the little spur on the bottom of the calcaneus to the big toe.
Perfect. And we are using the term plantar fasciitis. So when we hear fasciitis, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so we're able to differentiate pain in this kind of plantar area a little bit, especially when we're starting having pain in the fascia primarily. So fasciitis, if I'm going to use that term, we're probably going to use more for the acute phase. So if somebody has a recent flare-up of heel pain, and that's where the fascia, that's where that heel bone is typically in the heel. If it's relatively new or acute, it can have more of an inflammation factor to it. And that's when we'll use the term, fasciitis. If something's been going on for a while, so if it's been going on, 3 months or plus, we start to say this is now a plantar fasciopathy, which is kind of a new term, but it also relates to how we treat it as almost a chronic tendon problem, which is kind of interesting. So you treat them a little bit differently. And we can talk about that a little bit, but there's definitely the acute, more flared up phase, which might have more inflammation to it, which we'll call fasciitis.
Okay. So we've distinguished what the fascia is. absolutely different than a tendon. In tendons, we have tendinitis, but we also have tendinosis. Do they have fasciosis or no?
That's what they're using, the tendinopathy. Yeah, that's what they're using for the new term of plantar fasciopathy, because they're starting to treat chronic what we used to call fasciitis, chronic plantar heel pain or plantar foot pain, as actually like a chronic tendon disorder, which is kind of exciting because it allows us to look at some of these loading protocols, which we'll talk about a little bit. But we can start to strengthen the fascial connections of that plantar fascia.
Right on. And what typically causes plantar fasciitis?
Yeah, and obviously that's such a big question because if you Google plantar fasciitis, everything in the world will pop up. Like, I don't know if you've ever done a Google search of plantar fasciitis, but I mean, thousands of products and articles. The two main things I think to remember with foot pain is you can have a certain reason for foot pain in non-athletic populations. So when we talk about the way we probably would treat foot pain or plantar fasciitis or fasciopathy with non-runners is a little bit different than how we would treat that with runners, because the reason for those can be a little bit different. So if we talk about runners specifically, there can be a couple things. So some people actually have a lot of fascial tightness. So that would be one group of people that they're tight, they don't have enough range of motion, so they constantly are banging into limited range of motion during their runs. And sometimes mechanics can have a part of it. Some people are very aggressive with overstriding, or sometimes even training. They've done a lot of aggressive downhill training and have had a lot of high impact to those areas. So that's definitely one group of people. Some other groups are actually not tight. They've actually lost elasticity to their fascia, so they don't have the elastic recoil as much as they once did. So we really have to start instating some of that elastic recoil back to their system. But there's all kinds of reasons people can have that kind of plantar heel pain. So it can come down to mechanics. It can come down to weakness. So not having we'll talk a little bit about hamstrings and glutes, but they can have weakness throughout the whole posterior chain that's overloading the calf muscle and making the plantar fascia have to be overloaded also. Footwear, so just running into old footwear is very common. Nothing big has changed, but they know they've overdone it and they don't have any more return from their shoes, or their shoes feel a little bit dead and they've been running on them too long. So that's another reason people can sometimes have that. So there really is a large spectrum. So when someone starts having symptoms, to really start looking at all the things that have been going on for the last, I would say 4 to 6 weeks, and trying to narrow it down to a few things that might have gone on. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Let's talk about, it usually takes a while for plantar fasciitis to go away. There's probably numerous reasons, but talk about blood flow to that area, if you would.
Yeah, it doesn't have an incredible amount of blood flow. That's definitely, for sure, part of that. Also, when you think about it, we constantly have to weight bear on our feet. So, an example, sometimes people can have, plantar fasciitis from some of their mechanics or overtraining or whatever's going on with their running, but say they have a job that they have to stand 10 or 12 hours on their feet all day. They really aren't allowed to kind of rest that area very well. So it's a very hard area to rest or have modified rest with. So that's another, kind of big reason for that.
Right. And you talked about before, there's typically, 2 spots, one main one that a person can feel plantar fasciitis. Can you just go over that one more time?
Yeah, and I think it's, I always like to give kind of imagery for some of the listeners about what plantar fasciitis is and heel pain, and some things that might look like plantar fasciitis, but definitely need to be ruled out. So I tell people, if you walk your hand kind of down your calf and then around your heel, and you go onto the bottom of your heel to where the heel faces the floor, a little bit to the middle and then toward the inside is that calcaneal tubercle, okay? that is usually where the plantar fascia starts. Okay, so usually in that area is kind of that traditional heel pain or plantar fasciitis. That's where the tendon of the plantar fascia starts. People can also start to have some mid portion plantar fascia pain on the medial arch, so like in the arch of their foot. So those are the two main places that people will have the quote unquote plantar fasciitis. If you start having foot pain, but it's more into the ball of your foot, that's usually a little bit different. And that's that forefoot pain or metatarsalgia is not that typical kind of plantar fascia pain. The big things to watch out for is if you go down into your heel and you find that the whole heel bone is relatively sore. I had this with a client that came in a couple of years ago, and they've been diagnosed with Achilles tendinopathy. And I looked at their heel, and their heel looked kind of swollen and big. And you do something called what's called a calcaneal squeeze test, where you actually take both sides of your hand and you squeeze both sides of the heel bone. If this lights a person up, if this really reproduces a lot of pain and some of their symptoms, we really want to be careful about a calcaneal stress fracture. So definitely be aware of that. If you feel like it's more of your calcaneal or heel bone, especially if you've had you've been bombing a lot of downhills, a lot of aggressive downhill running and impact, that's something you definitely want to get x-rayed and ruled out. The other thing to really be aware of, if you have arch pain, if you run your fingers down the inside of your arch and you'll feel a little bone that's on the side of your foot. If your pain is more on that bone, that's called the navicular. That's also a place that you really want to rule out as a stress fracture that can happen. That's another critical area that you definitely want to rule out. So sometimes being very specific about where these painful areas are is important, especially when you're dealing with plantar foot pain. So I just like to bring this up a little bit so people know where when to go see somebody definitely for all the stress fractures. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. With that said, got some thunder boomers here. Is it easy to diagnose by a medical professional? And that said, is there dangers in self-diagnosis of plantar fasciitis?
Oh yeah, so that's exactly what I really, the stress fracture part, and that's why I really wanted to kind of bring the listeners through that kind of visual, is if you do suspect that it's more of a bony injury, it's a deep ache in those two bones I mentioned, there's no harm in it. Just go get it checked out and x-rayed and make sure that you don't have a stress fracture. So that's really the main part of, or the danger, I'd say, in self-diagnosing or continuing to run on something that's super painful. It's just making sure it's not a stress fracture. And you can't actually rupture your plantar fascia. That can happen. I mean, a lot of runners that have, ruptured their plantar fascia. And you recover from it, but you do lose a little bit of that natural elastic return of that fascial group. So that's also, again, another risk factor, I would say, but it's not as much as the stress fractures.
Right on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We had some big thunder here.
Hey, Miles.
My dog got a little bit scared, so he's joining us for a little bit here.
Great.
And that said, with risk of rupture, I'm not sure how common that is, but are you in danger of doing more damage when you run if you have plantar fasciitis? Yeah,
I mean, the biggest thing, and when I tell my clients, and sometimes I use the term, don't give your tendons a tantrum. No good, I think, comes from just continually banging into a painful area with your runs. And sometimes it's not about necessarily, any kind of danger to the area. Sometimes it has to do with what kind of compensations are going to occur as a result. Because our bodies are very smart at getting from point A to point B, and if they can't load properly, they're just going to load something else. And so I think more harm comes from, continuing to bang into an injury and trying to ignore it versus kind of taking care of it and giving yourself, a couple weeks or a couple months to get through this, even if it just means modifying your running a little bit, which is usually what it means. You don't usually have to stop running. But usually you can cause more problems, I think, if you continue to bang into them. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Aside from time, is there other treatments or therapies that you would suggest for runners that may be suffering?
Yeah. So I'll just kind of throw a couple lists in here. So for people that are listening, you can have some strategies. And if anyone has any questions, you can always contact me. But if you're in the acute phase, so say you start having pain suddenly, you feel like it's more inflammatory, it feels very flared up. That's the time that you really want to do things that really kind of make the area feel better. So that's where icing, I think, really comes into play. I think gentle stretching. I really like myofascial release of the calf muscles, whether trigger point release, whatever method you like, whether it's massage therapy, trigger point release, roller, whatever that is, but really rolling out those calf muscles. Also take a look at your hamstring. I think it's really important to look at that whole posterior chain myofascially. So rolling out your hamstring and even up into the glutes can be very helpful. And then doing some light trigger point work on the bottom of the foot. Some people have heard about cross friction, instrumented assisted cross friction techniques using a little scraper. You can get those on Amazon, or you can use like the flat handle of a spoon, and you just put a little bit of lotion on your foot, and you just do a little bit of myofascial scraping on the bottom of your foot. And I can also send some links to those techniques, but they're pretty easy. Finding shoes that are extremely comfortable for you. I think every one of my clients that have had foot or heel pain have loved those Oofos Sandals that you introduced me to. Everyone I get them for loves them. They tend to really like those. Things that add support but softness tend to be helpful. Sometimes arch supports are they're kind of 50-50 with that. Sometimes people feel like the arch supports are helpful. Heel cups, I mean, we see it in the literature as being helpful, the gel heel cups, but I would say anecdotally, I don't see a lot of people get a lot of relief from heel cups. I think a soft pair of inserts that have some of that pour-on cushioning. Pour-on is kind of like a very soft, spongy cushioning. If you talk to your local, podiatrist or shoe store that has those, they usually can recommend those, and I think those are a little bit more helpful. And then taping, and it's super easy. There's some great rock taping techniques or athletic taping techniques, but you can easily YouTube those. I'll put a couple up on my site, but taping I think is really great. And I know that sounds like a long list, but when you suffer from foot pain, it's really great to have, I think, some really nice tools to do immedially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it can be super painful.
What about like compression sleeves? Like the little the toes are exposed, but it's got like it goes basically behind the met head to basically the almost top of the Achilles. Are there any?
Yeah, some people find that they're helpful. Again, it's kind of a 50-50 split, I think, both in the literature and anecdotally. I usually try to find them some insoles that make them feel better so they can just use them all day. But if they find a pair of socks or compression arch supports that they like, that's perfectly fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
How about the Strasbourg sock? The Strasbourg sock or the night splints?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Those tend to help the population that have plantar fasciitis the most, that have tightness. And so what you can do, so if you're a listener, if you're wondering if your calves are tight, some people just know automatically their calves are tight. They're like, my calves are super tight. They've always been tight. And obviously for that group of people, that's where the soft tissue massage and the stretching really can help. But yeah, I usually tell everyone to try it because it either really helps with those night compression or those night splints with the Strauss sock, or you call it like a dorsal night splint. You can get them on Amazon, and they basically are a light foot splint that have the Velcro bindings that go not under the foot but over the foot. To try them, because we call the hallmark sign of plantar fasciitis first step pain. The first steps you take in the morning are very painful. That's kind of the hallmark sign of that. So if you do those devices, if you try a Strauss sock or if you try the dorsal night splint, and you're like, okay, I think it really helped my first step pain, the pain I first have in the morning, continue with it. Keep with it, because all it does is keep the fascia from completely tightening back up again at night while your foot's flexed. So that's a great thing to do, and definitely try in the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. What are some things you shouldn't do when you have plantar fasciitis?
Usually it's kind of a self-limiting diagnosis. So a lot of the things that people shouldn't do, they don't do because it hurts. Standing on really hard floors and really minimalist like socks or bare feet usually really hurts. So they tend to gravitate towards more comforting shoe wear. Obviously try to modify, if you're a runner, try to modify your terrain. Harder surfaces, or especially usually downhill, aggressive downhill tends to really bother that kind of heel pain. Sometimes running uphill really bothers the arch pain. So kind of modifying your surfaces either to more giving surfaces like an easy trail run or something like that can be helpful. But a lot of the things that cause pain, people usually shy away from doing anyway. They're usually self-limiting with that. So,
any types of things you can suggest that people look for in footwear if they're suffering with plantar fasciitis, or something they can pick up in the type of footwear, to get them through it?
Yeah, it kind of differs for everybody. With a typical kind of heel pain, some people do like to be in a shoe that's not zero ramp or completely flat. Sometimes they do like to be in a shoe that has a slight elevation or ramp differential in the shoe when it comes to the heel pain. Arch pain, when it's more into the inside of the arch, it's a little bit different. Some people like to be in flatter shoes. It's kind of a different kind of loading, I think. So I usually tell people to go and try on, several different types of shoes so they can find what they gravitate towards. But if I have somebody that has heel pain and they feel better in a cowboy boot during the day, I just tell them to, try that, bring your cowboy boot, wear it for half the day, then wear your other shoe the other half of the day, or clog or whatever that may be. But yeah, usually people have found the shoes in their closet that have really, tend to help. And then I try to mimic it with other shoe wear for their running to help with that. But with running, it's kind of tough because not everyone is, if they have heel pain, sometimes they're not a heel striker. So they never actually load or their heel on the ground. So if they're a 4-foot striker, it doesn't matter what you put into the heel of their shoe because they're never going to utilize it. But looking at gait is super important, I think, when someone's having heel pain, because there are some things you can do with gait to help minimize, forces on the heel and plantar fascia. So
right on. Excellent. You also had we had talked previously about a good article that you had found. Do you want to touch on that for a moment, and we'll put that in the show notes so everybody can see read the article. But
yeah, sure. And so it kind of touches on the idea of exercises. What exercises? And I don't really count stretching as exercise. So stretching is great. Soft tissue work is great. But I would say there's kind of two thoughts of what kind of exercises you should do, and I'll break it up into, like, if you have a really, what we'll call like a hot plantar fasciitis, like a very acute situation, painful, plantar heel pain. I like to do easier exercises that work the intrinsic foot. So even just while you're sitting, working on what's called an exercise called yoga toes. You can even look that up on YouTube. Jay Sherry has some YouTube exercises on intrinsic foot muscles. But that's just utilizing the muscles that are actually underneath the plantar fascia. We have 4 layers of muscles under the fascia of our foot. So you can actually work those muscles very gently to start adding some stability under the arch. So I really do like some of those intrinsic or very easy foot exercises when people have very tender plantar fascia situations. As we get into more of some of the chronic stuff, this would fall into the category of maybe a runner. They don't start having their plantar fascia hit till like mile 3. If they run 7 miles, they really ache afterwards. So it takes a significant amount of loading to start bringing on their pain, and they still have that kind of first step pain in the morning. For people that are in that category where they actually can handle a good bit of loading, but they have symptoms at a certain point, I like to look at what's called an eccentric plantar fascial loading protocol. You see this a lot with Achilles. I think we're all very familiar with the eccentric exercises for the Achilles, where you slowly lower into a heel drop off a step. I'm going to spell this author's name because you can do Google Scholar and find it, but it's a nice protocol on loading plantar fascia. And I was telling Aaron earlier, this came into all my speech impediment problems. The name is Rathleff, Rathleff, and he published a paper in 2015 that kind of outlines this eccentric plantar fascia loading protocol. And the way, and really one of the biggest ways it differs from the Achilles is that they actually rolled up kind of a t-shirt material or towel, and it to flex the big toe. So when you look at the picture, you're going to see that the big toe is basically propped up into extension while they're doing the heel lowering protocol. So if you get a chance to look up that article, and there's one thing actually I'm going to start doing with the clinic. I had to reach out again for the name of this, but there's actually like this little platform that has this bump, and I'm really not into gimmicks at all, but I'll tell you, trying to find something to prop up your big toe comfortably is very tough. But it's called the plantar fascia fighter. It's on Amazon, and it has this little bump on it. So I would say if you're kind of serious, I'm gonna get some for the clinic just to kind of see how clients like it, but it does kind of make it easy to prop up that big toe into extension as you lower the heel. Now, again, this is an entirely higher loading protocol. So if you have a really painful plantar fascia situation, I wouldn't jump right to that loading protocol. I would do the stuff I mentioned earlier, and then doing the intrinsic foot exercises, the ankle exercises too, to strengthen. And I'm always happy to show people what they are or give them a list. That I would wait to do this higher loading protocol for when you're much more tolerant about walking and running on that foot. And really it's to add resiliency to that fascia for those higher loading events, running several miles or running terrain. But that is kind of a leading protocol for plantar fasciopathy at this time.
Awesome. Anything else we should touch on?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I like just outlining what you should do in the acute phase, again, when things are super tender, and what to do in the more chronic phase when things are more resilient. But again, you need to have your symptoms addressed with those higher loading activities. So just being aware of those two things. And then, mechanics, running mechanics, I think are very important to look at, because sometimes it has nothing to do with the foot while you're having plantar foot pain. And I find that very, very commonly, very frequently. So I would say if you have something stubborn and it's just not working out and you don't know why, have someone look at your gait. And I think it's also important to mention, and I think a lot of physicians and podiatrists also give these kinds of warnings. Sometimes you'll hear about a cortisone injection in your plantar fascia. Really try to avoid those if you can. And really, those are efforts that are usually last ditch, but can be, but sometimes you'll talk to people that have had them, and they're like, "I can knocked it out for me." It's just that sometimes it can weaken the tissue a little bit. So really, reserve those kinds of therapies to kind of a last effort, which, definitely there's some times that you need that, but trying to reserve the cortisone injections.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
If people have questions or want to reach out to you about, form analysis, gait analysis, can you give everybody how to reach you?
So I have a website, therunnersmechanic.com. On it, you have my email, so you can always contact me through the email form there. Also, my cell number's on there. If people text, I actually respond to text pretty well. But emails are great. That way you can ask me questions. I also have a resource page on there you can look at, but you can ask me questions. I can give you as much as I can with things to do at home, or if you want to schedule an appointment, you can do that online, or I can help you with that too. So, just let me know.
You also have a YouTube channel that has some great resources. How can they find you on YouTube?
It's the Runner's Mechanic on YouTube. Yeah, and if there's something that you want to see, I always take. Sometimes work gets really busy, and I don't get a lot of videos up on there. So, if there's something you want to see, just let me know, and I'll make a YouTube video. It gives me a good incentive to get that done. So, yeah, definitely.
And you're also on Facebook as well under the Runner's Mechanic. Is that right?
Right. Exactly.
Great. Awesome. Miriam, thank you. We'll be doing some more episodes with Miriam. We're going to just move up the body, probably touch on the Achilles next. So I appreciate your time, Miriam. And thank you for all your wisdom and knowledge. And hopefully this has helped some people. And if they have more questions, they can reach out to you.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Once again, thank you, Miriam, for coming on the podcast, for sharing your knowledge. I love hearing from Miriam and her expertise on the subject matter. I will post the protocol that she referred to from Rathleff on the show notes, as well as some of the other. She mentioned Jay Seri and all of her social media, YouTube channel, and all that, ways to reach her. She's a great resource. If you're having problems with plantar fasciitis or any other problems, she's a great person to reach out to, or just look on her YouTube channel for some home remedies that she may have that you can do while at home to help yourself in general strength. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you for engaging with me once again. Next week we have on Sean Simmons, another physical therapist who does blood flow restriction. And it was I went in to kind of experience it for myself, and wow, I mean, I couldn't believe the experience. It was only 4.5 minutes, and I was really sucking wind. It's amazing what this technique does. So we'll be talking more about blood flow restriction and how it affects your training and how it can benefit you in the next episode. So stay tuned for that. Until then, my friends, keep on running, and we'll talk to you next week.